Hello friends and followers, welcome back to TJ's Modeling Bench, and this is our final reveal episode of the A-7 Corsair 2 done in the Air Force markings from the Vietnam era. Everything's in black primer. I used the Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 black in the rattle can. And then I've gone over any access panels or movable surfaces, doors, access panels to the avionics bays. I hit all that with a interior green, like a zinc chromate green from Mr. Color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray all that again using the AK Worn Effects acrylic fluid. All right. So then after we get our color coats on, and I'm going with the Southeast Asia Vietnam era paint scheme. So we got a gray underside and then a three-tone camouflage upper surfaces. So once that's on, we'll go in and we will start to remove little bits of that color coat by wetting that Worn Effects agent. We use a toothpick in some water and just lightly rub at it, and it'll remove the paint on top of this fluid, because this fluid will get soft with the water, and that will give us our chipping effect. And we're not going to go heavy with it, just some very light chipping, leading edges. Again, panels that open and close, or access panels. There's like fuel access caps on the top of the wing, hinge points, the crew steps and the ladder, the inlet to the engine, all that. We'll just do some real light chipping, just so it shows that it's being used, right? I did this on my F4F Wildcat, and I think it turned out just fantastic. I was really pleased with the way that turned out. The only thing I won't be doing to this one that I did do that, the F4F Wildcat, I first shot it with an aluminum, I think it was an aluminum enamel from Testers, if I'm not mistaken. And then I did my zinc chromate over that, so that in some areas it actually wore all the way down to what would have been the bare metal finish of the aircraft. Now, in this case, I'm not going to go that far with it. So, but yeah, that's where we stand right now. Everything, all the other parts, the tailplane, the landing gear doors and whatnot, those are all in primer as well. So I'm just waiting on some paint. I decided I'm not going to use the Mission Models colors like I originally planned. I actually kind of like the Mr. Hobby stuff, and I also use a lot of Tamiya. In fact, I have mostly Tamiya acrylics. I don't have really their lacquers, and I've used Tamiya for years, so I'm very comfortable with it. And the Mr. Color paints work very much like Tamiya, so there's not a big learning curve between the two of them. And with the Mission Models, I've used it on a couple of aircraft, and there is a little bit of a learning curve to it. So I felt more comfortable going this route. But the problem I have is that the camouflage colors that I need for my Southeast Asia color scheme, my local hobby shop did not have those colors available. I already had this, the interior green. And I tried some online sites, and apparently those colors are very hard to come by right now in the jar. But I did manage to find all of them in aerosol cans. Now, what I intend to do with those, though, is I will spray the underside gray from the rattle can, and then I will mask off a demarcation line on the lower portion of the fuselage, because the gray stops probably about a third of the way up with a rough wavy edge, and we'll will tape off the undersides of everything after that's sprayed. And then on the top, I will probably use the aerosol can of the lightest color, which I believe is a tan, brownish tan. And then the other two greens, I will decant and spray those with the airbrush. So I got my order of Tamiya aerosol paints in today. I've already done this to 2 of them, but I told you I need to decant them to airbrush them onto the model. And I thought, well, maybe I should show you how that's done if you've never done it before. And it is still kind of new to me. This is only probably, it's probably only the second time I've done this. So it can be messy. It is a little messy. I don't know that you can really get around that in entirety, but I'll show you what I do anyway. So first off, you need some kind of a tube, a straw. I just happen to have my pipettes, and I have several of them. So we're going to waste a couple here. And I want basically a good straight portion of it. I don't so much want the taper, because if we're trying to spray out, we don't need the velocity that's coming out of that tapered end. We want it fairly consistent, because we're going into this small jar with it, so we don't want it to really want to splash out. And then the other thing I like to do, if I can, I'll flatten this down, and I usually flatten it so that the seams are at the sides, and I'll just cut a little bit of a curvature to it. All right, can you see that? So that when we made it up against our nozzle on the paint can, it'll fit on that a little bit better. Now this is way bigger, but see how it goes against the push button, right? So now we need to tape that on there. And I'm going to go ahead and use my Tamiya tape. This might be wasteful, but I don't know. I like the tape. I use it a lot, so to me it's not really wasteful, because I use it for just about everything. So we'll hold that there, and this is just to get it in place for the moment. All right, so that's where we want it. Now we need to tape it up a little bit more, and I'll probably use this narrower stuff. It'll come up underneath. All right, and we'll wrap that around on there, and then maybe go with a wide piece around where we have that original piece as well. Tuck it in a little better. All right, this is the part that can be messy, okay, because it's gonna want to leak out here at the bottom. So if you can seal it up there good, do your best. It's really not easy to do, and to me that's why it becomes messy, because I don't seal it up probably as good as I really should. I don't waste a whole lot of effort doing this. So now our paint can's ready. We'll have to shake that up. So these are, I think I ordered these jars on Amazon years ago. I don't really like them as much as I hoped, because if you can see, there's no seal. So when you screw that lid on, there's no rubber seal to it, which for now that's okay. What we're going to do, these are the fingertips off a rubber glove, latex glove, and we're going to stretch this over the opening of this jar. Well, maybe if I can do this without shooting it everywhere. Okay, just like that. And we're going to use our hobby knife to cut a little slit, maybe a little cross, so that when we're ready to spray, we can slip our tube inside this, just like that. and that'll help keep the paint in the jar, right? Because it's going to come out pretty good. And the reason we're doing this, like I said, is to airbrush it, but also the aerosols that are in this can, all right, what makes it spray, we need to let that off gas. So we're going to spray it into this jar. We'll take this off after we've got a fair amount of it sprayed in there, and we'll just let it sit with no lid on it for a while, up to a couple hours or more, to let that gas off gas. Because if you try to spray it through the airbrush, it almost looks like soda water because it's fizzing, and you don't want that while you're trying to paint it. It just, coming out of the jar onto your model, or out of the can rather onto your model, it's made to do that, but when you decant it, it just, I don't know, it doesn't work as well in the airbrush unless you off gas it. So that's that. But it's really, that's all we're going to do. We'll spray it into there, and that'll be it. All right, there's our jar. You can see I was holding it with my left hand in this glove and spraying it with my right. So it is a little messy. I had it all over the jar. I kind of wiped it off a little bit. And I'll probably just leave this on here because the hole is there, and just let it sit in off gas. I'll set it somewhere on the bench out of the way so I can't spill it. And once it's off gas, then I can use it in the airbrush. There you can see it off gassing. See the bubbles? It's like soda. But eventually that'll stop. Just like soda does, it'll go flat. The paint will still be good, and it won't harden up. That's just those propellants, the aerosol propellant, evacuating the fluid. And not everything went according to the vision I had at the beginning, and let's discuss those things before I show you our final product. All right, so the biggest problem I had was doing the chipping that I was going to do for that worn look on the paint. And the problem is actually the paint itself, because I'm an idiot. So what I thought I was using, all right, it is Tamiya, all right, and it says AS13. Come on. All right, so AS. Now, I had made the assumption, and I made the wrong assumption, that meant it was an acrylic spray. And it's not. It is actually a lacquer paint. And I discovered that after I sprayed the first color and I went to clean my airbrush, because I tried to use the Tamiya X20A, which is for acrylic paint, and it didn't do anything. In fact, it did do something. It almost like coagulated the paint, so it kind of balled it up and separated it from the thinner. So I knew right away I had an issue there. So I used the lacquer thinner that Tamiya makes, and that worked great at removing the paint from the airbrush. But the problem is the chipping fluid that I used, the MIG ammo chipping fluid, that's a water-based fluid, like, but not exactly like the Tamiya jar paints. The acrylic jars that I use, those are an alcohol base, but with water you can rub those down and get them to come loose with that chipping fluid underneath it. But with these aerosols, this AS, you can't do that. You can't put the water on it after it's cured and then try to get it to dissolve and show that underneath layer. It just doesn't work. So I don't have any chipped paint. That was a wasted step in the end. But what I did end up doing to weather it to some extent was I used oil paints. And I like using the oils versus a lot of powders and chalks. or other paints, thin down paints. Even I'm not even a big fan of the Tamiya panel liner. And the reason to me is that I can work with these a lot easier. With a little bit of mineral spirits, white spirits, thinner, and a brush, I can mix these. I can move them around easily. If I get too much or it's too saturated in one area, I can wipe off the brush, and with a mostly dry brush, it will wick that wet paint and thinner back up into the brush and off of the model. So you still leave some of it there, but you can take more of it off. Now, if you don't like it at all, you can easily take a piece of paper towel with some white spirit on it and completely remove it altogether. So I like the oils, and I think they work well for that. My weathering isn't heavy. I did just a little bit of streaking. So I was an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force, and although I was on bigger aircraft, the bombers, I know areas that leave streaks, what those streaks are caused from, and what they look like. So a lot of hinge areas will get a dark soot into them, and that will streak. The grease and oil in those hinges will streak. Hydraulic fluid leaks, fairly often. That will sometimes leave a streak, a pinkish red. Those are the kinds of things that I could see when I did that kind of work. And that's how I address weathering this. So let me move the camera and I'll give you all a closer look at stuff, all right? All right, so the overall weathering on this is fairly subtle, maybe even hard to see on camera, but there is some streaking going back across the top of the wings, mainly coming out of these slat gaps, the leading edge slats, because there are tracks that those kind of move in, and those tracks have grease in them, and grease gets dirty, it moves in the air, so that's what causes a lot of the streaking, and it causes the black marks underneath there. See, when it's first painted, these are white underneath the slats, but after use and wear, a lot of that grease transfers and it catches dirt and other debris, and it turns that white pretty dirty looking. I had a problem with silvering pretty badly in a few areas. This LV marking, I think you can see that when I turn into the light, is pretty well silvered. I did use microsol and microset, or microset first, then microsol, and it did pretty well on some of these, but there's a few of them that it just wouldn't go away. In fact, there was a decal right up here underneath the pitot tube on this left side, right above the crease where the intake is, and that silvered really bad. I couldn't get it to go away, and then eventually it just kind of fell off, and you can see there is one right above my thumbnail, and it's got a little bit of silvering in it, not real noticeable, but the other one was really noticeable, very obvious. Weathering on the underside, again, fairly minimal. I did do a little bit of the black oils in some of these panels here, and I just knocked my canopy off. It was still actually drying from the glue, so it's not set. Anyway, I'll put that back on in a minute. No big deal. Weapons. It did not come with weapons other than two Sidewinder missiles that go on the rails along the sides of the fuselage. But it did come with the weapons pylons and the racks for the Mark 82s. Well, I don't have those on hand, and I wasn't necessarily going to wait for weapons to show up for me to paint and get added to it. So I left off the outermost pylons, which attach right underneath where the wing tip hinges. They actually mount in that hinge location. So I left those off. The center ones, I added the rack for the Mark 82s. And then on the inboard one, those are fuel tanks, droppable fuel tanks. So, yeah. I just didn't think having the missiles on there would look right with no other weapons on the aircraft. So I left those off. Back on the underside again, inside our wheel wells, you can see I used my oils to do a little bit of a dark wash inside there. All right, the red that you see there, that's actually the fuel cap for single point refueling. Nose wheel well, same thing. Dirtied it up a little bit with a wash. Used some brown and black, a little bit of red, and a little bit of that yellow ochre back here. That would represent oil staining, because this is where your engine is in this area of the aircraft, and engine oil does leak out, and it usually collects right on the bottom center line of the aircraft. You know, it rolls down the sides and collects on the center, and then rolls toward where our tail hook would be. So yeah, it's subtle, but it's there. And overall, I think it turned out well. And now that that canopy is off, you can see a little bit better into the cockpit. The window, all that masking that I did, there's your... All right, the white is actually the sealant that would be around those windows installed. All right, our pitot tubes, our boarding ladder. Overall, I'm happy with it. Could be better. I could have done better, but I'm happy with it. Is it a show winner? Absolutely not. This will be a shelf queen.